Snow doesn't care about your suit. That was her first thought. Not recognition. Not alarm. Just snow settles on silk the exact same way it settles on cotton. Service exit. 11 p.m. Cold enough that Simone felt it in her knuckles. Her warm brown hands were tucked into her coat sleeves. Cart already returned. Worn canvas bag on her shoulder. Mine 2 stops ahead on the bus. She rounded the base of the steps and nearly put her foot through his hand. He didn't flinch. He was sitting on the second step from the bottom. Korean. Expensive black suit, not a single button undone. A dragon tattoo climbing the left side of his neck, visible above the collar and the thin service light. A cobalt blue suitcase beside him. A guitar case flat on the step to his other side. Snow collecting on both his shoulders. On the surface of each case. In the dark crown of his hair. He hadn't moved to brush any of it away. A man sitting in accumulating snow had been here long enough for it to settle. This was not a man who had just arrived. His eyes worked the street in slow, methodical sweeps. Not lost. Not afraid. Calculating. Simone Carter knew exactly who he was. Stay with this. Because what she does in the next 60 seconds, and why, is the question this entire story was built to answer. 3 years of cleaning the penthouse floor had given her his name before she ever looked it up. Ji-hoon Kang. Said in that building the way people say the names of weather systems, with awareness, with distance, and never directly at the thing itself. Right now, that particular man was sitting in the snow. Cobalt suitcase. Guitar case. The carefully maintained expression of someone whose calculation had come up short. She stood still. His eyes swept the street one last time. Then they found her. His gaze moved across her, the yellow uniform beneath her open coat, the white apron, the worn bag, the flat shoes. Up to her face. The way a man reads a room. Categorizing. Filing. She held his gaze without shifting. Snow fell between them. Patient. Indifferent to them both. Simone looked at him sitting in it. Said 7 words? 7 words she had never once said to anyone. You can sleep here, if you need. He went still in a different way. He looked at her like something he could not name. Why would a woman with nothing to give offer shelter to a man like that? And why, when everything in him said refuse, was he still sitting there, reading her face like it might contain the answer to a question he hadn't known to ask? 2 blocks. 2 blocks of snow-covered pavement, amber street lamps, Ji-hoon Kang walking beside her in complete silence, cobalt suitcase in one hand, guitar case in the other. His expensive shoes leaving clean dark prints beside her flat black ones. 2 blocks was long enough for 3 facts. Fact 1. Simone Carter was not naive. She knew what that building was. Not everything. She had never gone looking for everything, because looking for everything is how you become responsible for what you find. But enough. The way certain doors on the residential floors locked from the outside on specific evenings. The way her supervisor had once gently rerouted her away from the east side of the penthouse level on Thursday nights without explanation. The way the floor above hers always smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and something else on mornings after she had not been permitted to clean it. She had chosen to see none of it. Not because she was foolish. Because the job needed her silence, and she needed the job, and 3 years ago she had decided that was a transaction she could live with. She had been living with it since. Fact 2. She owned one thing of value in this world. A rent-controlled one-bedroom her grandmother had left her, the only person who had ever handed Simone something without conditions attached. That apartment was not an asset. It was evidence. That she had lasted. That something given in love could hold its shape long after the hands that gave it were gone. She had never brought a single person through that door. Not once. Tonight she was bringing a man whose enemies had been looking for him for 2 days. Fact 3. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was doing it anyway. This was the part she did not examine too closely. Not yet. The cold was in her knuckles and Ji-hoon Kang was beside her, and the bus stop was behind them now. Her feet had already made the decision before her mind arrived. Some decisions work like that. Already made. Waiting for the rest of you to catch up. Simone had learned, a long time ago, not to argue with hers. Memory, for Simone Carter, arrived in images. Not feelings. Not impressions. Images, precise, ordered, retrievable in exactly the sequence they had been filed. Walking through the snow with Ji-hoon beside her, she could see the penthouse floor as clearly as if she were still standing on it. 3 years of Tuesday and Friday mornings. Service elevator to the top. 9 doors in the corridor. One she had never been asked to touch. She had noticed other things. His suits were always hung left side out. Every one. Every visit, without variation. She had rehung the first one out of habit, and found it turned back when she returned on Friday. She left them alone after that. She looked it up once, late at night, out of the particular kind of curiosity that has nowhere useful to go, and found the practice in exactly one source. A translated Korean military manual on personal discipline. Her paraphrase of what she had read: a man who must dress in darkness should always know by touch which side to lead with. He was always prepared to move. She had noticed the desk. Certain documents always face down. Always in the same position. Corners cut at a consistent angle against the desk edge, not aligned with it. Replaced between her visits, never removed entirely. She had never touched them. She had simply registered that their placement was deliberate, and filed that under "not yours." She had noticed the camera rotation on the East Corridor. Maintenance cycle. 3rd Thursday of every month. 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., 2 hours in which the East Corridor cameras ran on a single fixed angle, while the maintenance team was on the floor below. She had tracked this across 14 months before she was certain enough to call it a pattern rather than coincidence. Subscribe if you're still watching. She had done nothing with any of it. It wasn't hers. She was there to clean the floors. She cleaned the floors and kept her eyes to herself, which was not at all the same thing as not seeing. Simone Carter had never, in any room she had ever stood in, been able to stop her eyes from doing what they did. She noticed things. She filed them. She said nothing. She walked beside a man she had catalogued for 3 years and thought about none of this consciously. She just hadn't needed any of it yet. Home, to Simone Carter, was 440 square feet she had never once apologized for. She opened the door and went in first. Turned the lamp on, warm amber, the kind of light that makes a small space feel like a decision rather than a limitation. Small kitchen straight ahead. 1 door to the left. A bookshelf along the far wall that held more than it should. Her grandmother's green ceramic pot on the stove. The crocheted throw folded twice over the arm of the couch. Modest. Immaculate. She said nothing about either. Ji-hoon stepped through the door behind her and stopped at the center of the room. He stood there, suitcase in hand, guitar case against his leg, and she watched him do what she had watched him do on the street. Read everything. His eyes moved across the bookshelf, the kitchen, the window, the bedroom door. Methodical. Efficient. Then they went still. She pointed to the couch. Set a folded towel on the arm. Went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, not because she was being warm. Because she needed something to do with her hands while she processed what she had just brought through her grandmother's door. He didn't sit. She heard him move toward the window instead. When she looked over her shoulder, he was standing just back from the glass, far enough that he wouldn't be visible from the street below. Looking down at the pavement with the same systematic patience she had watched him use on the steps outside. She made tea he hadn't asked for. Brought it to him. Set it on the narrow windowsill at his elbow. He took it without looking at her. They occupied the same room in complete silence. This woman whose grandmother had built this space into something worth passing on, and this man who had lost everything he had built in the last 48 hours, and neither said a word. The silence was not uncomfortable. That was the part that caught her. Not what it was. What it wasn't. It was the silence of 2 people who had each, in different rooms and different lives, grown entirely accustomed to being unseen. She filed that observation away. The way she filed everything. She didn't know yet that it would matter. 5 a.m., and she wasn't the first one awake. She came out of the bedroom in her yellow uniform, gold hoops already in, bun already precise, the edges smooth and clean at her temples, baby hairs deliberately laid flat. She was particular about that. Had always been particular about that. The world could do whatever it intended. She met it assembled. Ji-hoon was at her kitchen table. His phone was in front of him in pieces. Battery to the left. SIM card to the right. Housing face down in the center. The components arranged in a line so exact it looked like intention rather than function. Which, she noted, it almost certainly was. She looked at it for a moment. Then she went to the coffee maker, filled it, set a cup beside the dismantled phone without comment, without slowing, without a pause longer than it took to place it, and went back to make her own. As if men she barely knew regularly took apart their phones at her kitchen table before dawn. She was particular about questions, too. She did not ask the ones that weren't hers yet. He watched her move through the kitchen. That same quiet, systematic attention she had clocked on the steps and at the window, nothing missed, nothing reacted to. She kept her back to him and waited for the coffee. He didn't speak until she was at the counter with her own cup. "Do you live alone by choice or by circumstance?" His first sentence to her in 6 hours. She thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Both," she said. He nodded once. Slowly. Not in acknowledgement. In confirmation, the nod of a man checking a figure he had already calculated. She went back to the bedroom for her bag. When she came out, coat on, canvas bag over her shoulder, he said, "You're going back to the building." Not a question. "I need the job," she said. He said nothing. But as she crossed the kitchen toward the front door, she felt his attention follow her, precise and unperforming, the way he tracked everything. Not threatening. Not possessive. Mapping. She felt it at her back all the way to the door. She didn't turn around. She left. She had no way of knowing what was already waiting for her in that building. What she was about to hear, and choose to carry back. Coat still on. Canvas bag still over her shoulder. She crossed the apartment, and sat down at the kitchen table. Ji-hoon was at the window. He turned when she came in. The stillness of her face moved him to the table without being asked. She folded her hands on the surface in front of her. Her nails caught the lamp light. The bangle at her wrist. Neither moved. "New tenants on the floor below yours." Her voice was even. "East Suite. 2 days." She paused one beat. "I was outside their door for 4 minutes. The wheel on my cart caught the runner." She had bent to free it. The voices came through the gap at the bottom of the door, close, unguarded, not expecting the corridor to hold anyone. She freed the wheel in 20 seconds. Then she made a choice. She stayed. 3 minutes and 40 seconds more. Completely still. One hand on the cart. Listening the way she listened to everything, without performance, without reaction, without any signal on her face that she was doing it at all. She told him everything she heard. Not almost. Everything. The name. Spoken twice in the room. Once casually. Once with the particular weight of people confirming they mean the same person. The timeline. 72 hours from the coup. The window was closing. Fewer than 24 remained. The location. This neighborhood. Not a building. A radius. They had narrowed it this far. Tomorrow night it would narrow further. Then the final piece. The one that changed the calculation entirely. Someone inside his former organization was feeding information outward. Not a stranger. Someone with access to the internal rotation schedule. She knew this because the voices had referenced the last confirmed pattern of Ji-hoon's movement through the building. That pattern lived in one place. The penthouse floor's maintenance records. The source was inside her building. When she finished, the room held the weight of what had just entered it. The guitar case against the far wall did not move. The cobalt suitcase beside the bookshelf did not move. Snow fell past the window. Indifferent. Nothing in the room responded. Except Ji-hoon. His eyes went to her hands first. Still folded. Completely still. The terracotta gloss on her nails. The thin gold bracelet. Not one tremor in any of it. Then to her face. Her copper hazel eyes were level and clear. The baby hairs at her temples lay flat and deliberate. She met his gaze the way she had met it on the steps outside, without performance, without apology, without any signal that she understood what she had just handed him. She understood exactly. She simply did not need him to see that. "You have until tomorrow night," she said. "Beat. So tell me what you actually need." For a long time, he did nothing. Not the stillness of a man at a loss. The specific stillness of a system running at full capacity with nothing surfacing. He sat across from her with his eyes on the table, and Simone let him. She uncrossed her hands. She didn't fill the silence. Then he asked his first question. Then his second. Then 7 more in 4 minutes, each one precise, stripped of everything except what the information required. Which floor? Which side of the corridor? Exact phrasing of the timeline. Male voices, female, or both. Cadence, fast or measured. Any accent beneath the Korean. Background sounds. Ventilation. Television. Anything else. Simone answered every one. Without pausing. Without checking anything. From 4 minutes in a corridor with her hand on a cartwheel, she had a clean, sequenced record, as complete as if she had been sent there with a brief. He went through the questions a second time. Different order. Testing for variation. There was none. He stopped. He looked at her. "How do you do that?" She considered it seriously. Not performing the consideration. Actually having it. "I don't know how to stop," she said. He stood up. Not abruptly. The controlled rise of a man who needs to place his body somewhere while his mind completes something. He moved to the window. Same position as before, back from the glass, angled toward the street, eyes on the pavement below without appearing to track it. She waited. Snow continued past the glass. Long, slow diagonals through the amber light from the building across the street. He stood there long enough for Simone to finish her tea and set down the cup. Long enough for the lamp to seem warmer. Long enough for the silence to stop being a gap and become a different kind of room entirely. When he finally turned around, something in his face had been reorganized. Not broken. Not soft. Reorganized, the specific shift in a structure when the load-bearing calculation has been revised upward. She had watched building inspectors make this face once. The moment they find a beam rated higher than anything on the blueprint. He came back toward the table. He stopped one step before his chair. Something in him was deciding something that had nothing to do with the plan. Then he pulled his chair to her side of the table. Saturday. The geometry of the room changed. Not opposite. Beside. The lamp between them and the wall. Both of them facing the same direction for the first time. "The rotation gap," she said. "3rd Thursday. 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. East Corridor cameras go to single fixed angle. Maintenance team is 1 floor down." Something in his expression shifted again. "That's when they're blind," he said. Not a question. "That's when the mole reports out," she said. "The window lines up. Whatever they're relaying, they send it during the gap. Every 3rd Thursday." He was still for a long moment. Then, "I move before they expect. I move first." She nodded once. "I'll get you a better job," he said. "When this is over." She looked at him. "I didn't do it for a job." He was quiet. The quiet of a man who has received something and cannot find the correct file for it. She watched him sit with it. She did not hurry him. She was patient the way she was patient about everything, not warmly, not strategically. Simply. The way a person is patient when they have learned that most things clarify themselves if you leave space around them. He reached across and drew the cobalt suitcase toward them. Laid it flat on the table between the lamp and her empty cup. did not open it. Rested both hands on its surface, those large, unhurried hands, and looked at her with the full, unmediated weight of his attention. Not categorizing. Not calculating. Looking. "You should not go back to that building," he said. "I need the—" "I know." He didn't say the job back at her. He said "I know," and there was something in it that sounded less like dismissal and more like a man setting down an argument he was never going to win. She had half risen from her chair without noticing. She sat back down. "Then stay," he said. "Because I need someone who listens the way you do. Right now, that is you." The table held a lamp, an empty cup, a suitcase, and the thin gold bracelet catching the light at her wrist. 30 years of building a world where every person had a function and a price, where loyalty was a transaction, warmth was a tactic, and help always carried a calculation behind it. In all of it, not once had anyone handed him what she had delivered in 3 minutes from memory, at a kitchen table, in a yellow maid's uniform. He didn't know what to do with that. That was the part that unsettled him, not the intelligence, not the 14 months of rotations she had mapped without intending to use them. The fact that she had done it without wanting anything back. Ji-hoon Kang had not encountered that problem. Not once. Not ever. 2 problems. Neither one asked for permission. Ji-hoon delivered the first without softening it, without delay, with the specific precision of a man who considers cruelty and clarity to be entirely different things. Someone had noticed her outside that door. A face, known or unknown, he couldn't say. Someone on the east floor with a reason to log who lingered near the suite. She should assume her address was already in motion. Her grandmother's apartment. 440 square feet held across 31 years, through rent hikes, through 3 management buyouts, through the particular institutional persistence of a building company that had tried 4 legal strategies to clear the residential floors and had not once succeeded. Her grandmother had held it through all of it with the same quiet, unmoving certainty that Simone had always recognized as the original source of her own. Left to Simone clean and intact. A thing given without conditions attached. The one thing that had held. Now possibly the liability that ended everything. Because she had stood in a corridor for 4 minutes. She excused herself. Went to the bathroom. Sat on the edge of the tub and ran the inventory she always ran, methodical, honest, without theater. Checking for fear. It wasn't there. She checked again. Turned its absence over twice. Tested it from different angles. It held. What she found instead was clarity, the particular clear-headedness that arrives when a decision already made is simply acknowledged. She had stood in that corridor, and she had listened, and then she had come home and told him, and the shape of that choice was entirely hers. She had stopped apologizing for her choices a long time ago. She washed her hands. Came back out. The cobalt suitcase was open on the table. The second problem was not external. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at what was inside it. Operational. Complete. Not just resources, a system. A burner device, already placed beside the case. Replacement SIM beside it. The other contents she filed without naming. All of it confirming in one clean visual what she had already understood but had not yet seen in material form. She took one full breath. Closed her eyes. Opened them. The contents were patient. She raised her eyes to his. "How long do we have?" The word arrived before she could review it. "We." It settled in the lamplight with the quiet certainty of something that had been true longer than either of them had permitted themselves to say. Morning was coming regardless. 2 a.m. The plan was complete. The hours between had been work. Neither of them was sleeping. Ji-hoon stood at the window. Simone was on the couch. The city had gone quiet. He spoke without turning. "Why did you help me?" She thought about it. Not performing the thought. Actually having it. "You looked like someone no one was going to help." He was still for a moment. "That was intentional," he said. "I know," she said. "Beat. I helped you anyway." He turned from the window. He looked at her across the dark room. She didn't look away. "You're going to be a problem," he said. "I've been a problem my whole life," she said. Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. The architecture of one. The intention. Without the arrival. She saw it. The copper hazel of her eyes caught the lamp from across the room. She filed it away. The way she filed everything. He went back to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. The street below was clean and still. The quiet settled over the apartment like something decided. She closed her eyes. He was still there when morning came. 3 weeks later, the threat was gone. Not resolved the way his old world had resolved things, with finality and the specific silence that follows it. Resolved differently. Precisely. Using a rotation gap mapped across 14 months of Tuesday and Friday mornings, a timeline delivered from memory at a kitchen table, and the exact communication window of the person feeding intelligence outward. Ji-hoon had moved before the window opened. He had moved clean. He was not what he had been. He was building something different now, smaller, quieter, with different numbers at its center. The penthouse floor belonged to someone else. His address was new. His structure was new. His first employee had not been recruited from the world he came from. Simone Carter sat at a desk by the window. New clothes bought herself, without waiting. The small gold hoops still in her ears. The slicked buns still precise at the crown of her head. The baby hairs at her temples still deliberate. A coffee cooling beside her right hand. Her copper hazel eyes moving across a document with the same systematic attention she had once given to the floors of a building that no longer held her. She had not asked what the job was called. She had simply started doing it. The cobalt blue suitcase was in the corner of the room, not where he had first set it, but where it had come to rest, the way things settle when a space stops being temporary. The guitar case was beside it. He had never explained either one. She had never asked? She already knew the suitcase. The guitar case she was still waiting on. She looked at them sometimes, both of them, in the corner of the room that was no longer hers alone. She didn't rush it. This is the answer to the question this story was built on. Why did he stay? In 30 years of building a world where every person had a function and a price, where loyalty was a transaction, warmth was a tactic, and help always arrived with a calculation behind it, he had never once encountered someone who helped without working out the return first. He didn't know what to do with that. So he stayed until he understood it. He was still working on it. And neither was he going anywhere. If you are new here, subscribe. A new story drops tomorrow.